The academic warning. The grand amphitheater of Kepler Research Station hummed with the nervous energy of 200 alien minds gathered for the annual Xenobiology Symposium. Dr. Sarah Chen adjusted her translator earpiece and settled into her seat near the back, trying to make herself as inconspicuous as possible among the sea of scales, tentacles, and crystalline forms. Beside her, Commander Jacob Torres shifted uncomfortably, his military bearing at odds with the academic setting. "Still think this was a good idea?" Jacob whispered, his breath forming small clouds in the cooler atmospheric mix preferred by most species present. Sarah nodded, though her stomach churned with anticipation. "We need to understand how they see us. Knowledge is power, remember?" The lights dimmed as Professor Vextar took the stage, his reptilian form commanding attention with its deliberate movements. The saurian scales caught the ambient light, creating an almost hypnotic pattern as he activated the holographic display system. Vextar was renowned throughout the galaxy for his theoretical work on extreme evolutionary adaptations. "Esteemed colleagues," Vextar began, his voice carrying through the chamber with practiced authority. "Today we examine the most terrifying possibility in xenobiological theory, the evolution of apex predators on Class 12 Deathworlds." A collective shudder rippled through the audience. Even the normally composed ethereals pulled their gaseous forms closer together. Sarah felt Jacob's hand brush against hers. A subtle gesture of solidarity. The holographic display materialized above the stage, showing a rotating planetary model. Warning indicators flashed red across its surface like blood drops on snow. "Observe the environmental parameters," Vextar continued. "Gravity coefficient 1.0 to 1.3 standard. Atmospheric composition highly corrosive. Weather systems of catastrophic intensity. Solar radiation levels that would sterilize most known life forms." A young crystalline researcher raised a limb that chimed softly. "Professor, surely no complex life could evolve under such conditions." Vextar's predatory smile revealed rows of sharp teeth. "Ah, but that is where you are mistaken, young Kessler. Life finds a way, and on Deathworlds, that way leads to perfection. In violence." The display shifted to show anatomical projections. Sarah's breath caught as she recognized the familiar bipedal form, the forward-facing eyes, the omnivorous dental structure. It was unmistakably human, though presented as a theoretical construct. The Deathworld apex predator would require several key adaptations, Vextar explained, manipulating the hologram with his clawed hands. Dense bone structure to withstand crushing gravity, redundant circulatory systems, rapid cellular regeneration. Most critically, a nervous system that thrives under extreme stress. A gaseous delegate's translation device crackled with distortion. "Thrives under stress? Surely you mean survives." "No, colleague Zephyr, I mean thrives." The professor's eyes gleamed with academic fervor. These theoretical beings would experience what we call positive stress response. Where we feel fear and seek safety, they would feel excitement and seek challenge. Their biochemistry would literally reward them for facing danger. Jacob's jaw tightened beside Sarah. She knew he was thinking of the adrenaline rush he felt during combat operations, the way humans actually performed better under pressure rather than worse. Their social structure would be equally disturbing, Vextar continued. Hierarchical packs based on proven competence. They would form bonds through shared hardship and find recreation in simulated combat. Most unnervingly, they would possess what I term protective aggression, the willingness to sacrifice themselves for their group without hesitation. The amphitheater had grown silent except for the hum of environmental systems. Several species had activated personal force fields, their fear palpable in the recycled air. Sarah watched the display show human military formations, family structures, and sporting events, all labeled as theoretical predatory behaviors. The accuracy was both impressive and deeply unsettling. "But surely," interjected a delegate from the peaceful coalition of moons, "such creatures would destroy themselves through internal conflict." "Another misconception," Vextar replied. "These apex predators would be capable of extraordinary cooperation. When facing external threats, they would suppress individual competition for group survival. Indeed, they might even develop complex ethical systems to regulate their violent nature. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. The professor was describing human civilization with startling accuracy while treating it as a horror story. Their expansion patterns would be predictable yet terrifying, Vextar went on. They would colonize the most hostile regions of space first, claiming territory others cannot use. They would thrive in asteroid fields, radiation zones, and gravitational anomalies. Every dangerous frontier would become their backyard. The star map that appeared showed expansion patterns remarkably similar to human colonial development, though the professor presented it as a conquering plague spreading through the galaxy. Most disturbing of all, Vextar's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the amphitheater, would be their persistence. These creatures wouldn't simply defeat enemies. They would pursue them across star systems if necessary. They would remember every slight, every threat to their pack, and they would never, ever give up. A nervous chittering arose from the insectoid section. Several delegates were openly trembling now. Of course, Vextar continued, we can take comfort in knowing such beings remain purely theoretical. The mathematical probability of such evolution reaching sapience and achieving spaceflight is vanishingly small. The universe has natural safeguards against such abominations. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the atmospheric controls. The professor's clinical description of humanity as theoretical monsters was bad enough, but his certainty that they couldn't exist made their hidden presence feel like a deception. Questions? Vextar asked, scanning the frightened audience. Jacob started to rise, but Sarah grabbed his arm. She could see the anger in his posture, the soldier's instinct to defend his species. But this wasn't the place for confrontation. Professor, called out a brave aquatic delegate, water sloshing in her containment suit. In your theoretical model, how would other species defend against such predators? Vextar's laugh was genuinely chilling. Defend? My dear colleague, there would be no defense. These apex predators would be perfectly adapted killing machines. Every biological system would serve the purpose of survival and reproduction under impossible conditions. They would be stronger, faster, and more resilient than any civilized species. But what about technology? Pressed another voice. Surely, advanced weapons would level the playing field. You assume they would remain primitive, Vextar replied. No, these theoretical predators would adapt any technology they encountered. They would improve upon it, weaponize it, and use it in ways its creators never imagined. They would turn every tool into a weapon and every weapon into a better weapon. The accuracy of this assessment made Sarah's skin crawl. Human history was indeed one of constant technological adaptation and improvement, often driven by military necessity. Furthermore, the professor continued, warming to his subject, their pack bonding would make them nearly impossible to negotiate with. Threaten one, and the entire species would unite against you. They would share resources, intelligence, and tactical knowledge instantaneously. Every individual predator would fight with the accumulated knowledge of their entire species. Sarah's heart skipped. Had Vextar just said, human? She glanced around nervously, but no one else seemed to have noticed the slip. In conclusion, Vextar began his summation. We must be grateful that such creatures exist only in our nightmares. The theoretical Deathworld apex predator represents everything antithetical to civilized life. They would be chaos incarnate, destruction personified, the end of peace as we know it. The applause was scattered and nervous, more relief than appreciation. As the lights came up, delegates began filing out in subdued clusters, their conversations hushed and fearful. Sarah and Jacob remained seated as the amphitheater emptied. The weight of what they'd just heard settled over them like a heavy blanket. So that's how they see us, Jacob said finally. As monsters. Theoretical monsters, Sarah corrected, though the distinction felt thin. He doesn't know we actually exist. Yet, Jacob added grimly. Before Sarah could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the amphitheater in pulsing red as the evacuation announcement echoed from hidden speakers. Attention all station personnel. This is not a drill. Multiple unidentified vessels approaching on attack vector. Preliminary scans indicate unknown species configuration. All civilians to emergency shelters immediately. Sarah and Jacob looked at each other with growing dread. Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see distant points of light growing larger against the starfield. Professor Vextar, still on the stage packing his equipment, suddenly froze. His reptilian features went pale as he stared at his scanner readings. "Impossible," he whispered, but his voice carried in the empty amphitheater. The energy signatures, the ship configurations, they match the theoretical models exactly. Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. The approaching ships weren't unknown at all. They were human vessels, probably a rescue squadron that had detected their emergency beacon from weeks ago, when the station's communications array had been damaged. "Sarah," Jacob said quietly, "we need to get to the command center, now." The truth revealed. The command center of Kepler Station had transformed into barely controlled chaos. Admiral Jexran, the station's Corvinian commander, stood rigid before the main display, while tactical officers from a dozen different species scrambled to make sense of their readings. Warning klaxons continued their ominous wail as the unknown ships approached. Sarah and Jacob slipped into the observation deck, their human security clearances getting them past the overwhelmed guards. Below them, the command crew worked frantically to analyze the threat. "Ship configuration unknown," reported a nervous insectoid sensor operator, her compound eyes reflecting the display screens. "Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. Propulsion system appears to be impossibly efficient." Admiral Jexran's blue-furred face was grim. "Time to intercept?" 18 minutes at current velocity, sir. But Admiral..." The operator's voice wavered. "They're not slowing down. If anything, they're accelerating." On the main screen, the approaching vessels grew clearer. Sarah's heart sank as she recognized the sleek lines of human destroyer escorts, their hulls scarred from passage through asteroid fields and radiation storms that would cripple most alien ships. "They're coming straight through the Hellfire Nebula," gasped a gaseous navigator. "Nothing can survive those radiation levels." Jacob leaned over to Sarah. "The nebula's just a Class 3 hazard zone. Any human ship can handle that with standard shielding. But to the alien crew, ships that could traverse what they considered an impassable death trap could only be one thing." Professor Vextar's theoretical apex predators made horrifyingly real. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission. It's in an unknown language." The alien words that filled the command center were actually English, but without proper translation protocols, they sounded like the harsh growls of predators to the terrified crew. "Kepler Station, this is Commander Patricia Voss of the Human Colonial Defense Force. We detected your distress beacon 3 weeks ago and have been en route to provide assistance. Please respond." But all the aliens heard was what sounded like threatening vocalizations from creatures that shouldn't exist. Sarah looked at Jacob desperately. "We have to do something. If we reveal ourselves now, they'll think we're advanced scouts for an invasion," Jacob replied grimly. "Look at them, they're terrified." Admiral Jexran was issuing rapid orders. "Raise shields, prepare all weapon systems, send an immediate distress call to the Galactic Defense Fleet." "Sir," the tactical officer's voice cracked, "our shields won't hold against those energy signatures. Their weapons appear to be beyond our current understanding." The approaching human ships were using standard plasma cannons and kinetic railguns, but to species accustomed to energy-based warfare, the combination of directed energy and physical projectiles seemed incomprehensibly advanced. 15 minutes to contact," announced the sensor operator. They're beautiful ships, Admiral. Terrible, but beautiful." Sarah could see what the alien meant. Human military vessels were designed for functionality in hostile environments, giving them a predatory elegance that must seem both attractive and terrifying to species whose ships were built for comfort and efficiency. "Admiral," the communications officer called out again. "The transmission is repeating, but there's something else. They're also broadcasting what appears to be mathematical sequences, universal constants. They might be trying to communicate." Jakob grabbed Sarah's arm. That's standard first contact protocol. Commander Voss is trying to establish peaceful intent. But the damage was already done. Admiral Jexron interpreted the mathematical sequences as proof of the aliens' analytical intelligence, making them even more dangerous in his mind. 12 minutes, the countdown continued. Admiral, they're launching smaller craft, dozens of them. The display showed human shuttle pods and fighter escorts taking defensive positions around the larger ships. To the aliens, it looked like a textbook invasion formation. That's it, Sarah said, standing up. Jacob, we can't let this happen. Before he could stop her, Sarah activated the command center's general address system. Her voice echoed throughout the station as she spoke in perfect galactic standard. Admiral Jexeron, this is Dr. Sarah Chen. I need you to listen very carefully. Those ships aren't here to attack us. They're here to help. The command center fell, silent except for the continuing alarms. Every alien eye turned to stare at the human woman who had just spoken their languages flawlessly. Impossible, whispered Admiral Jexeron. The translation matrix shows you as, but that can't be right. Jakob stepped up beside Sarah, his military bearing now obvious to everyone present. Admiral, I'm Commander Jacob Torres, Colonial Defense Force. Those are human ships responding to your distress beacon. We've been living peacefully in this sector for decades. The silence stretched until Professor Vextar's voice crackled over the communication system. He had apparently made his way to a comm station elsewhere on the station. The theoretical apex predators, he said, his voice filled with awe and terror. They're real. They're here. They've been here all along. Admiral Jexeron's fur was standing, on end. You're them. You're the Deathworld predators. Sarah stepped forward, her movements careful and non-threatening. We're humans, Admiral. We come from Earth, which, yes, is classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, but we're not here to conquer anyone. The mathematical models, Vextar's voice continued over the comm. They predicted you perfectly. Pack hunters, persistence predators, adapted for extreme environments. 8 minutes to contact, the sensor operator announced, though her voice was barely a whisper. Now Jakob moved to the tactical display. Admiral, may I show you something? With trembling hands, Jexeron nodded. Jakob pulled up the sensor readings from the approaching human fleet. Look at their formation. See how they're maintaining distance from your defensive perimeter? Notice the shuttlecraft are staying with the main ships instead of advancing. This is a rescue formation, not an attack pattern. Sarah added, We've been integrated into galactic society for 47 years. We serve on trade councils, research committees, and diplomatic missions throughout this sector. We've never initiated hostilities against any species. But the professor's lecture, stammered a crystalline officer, the pack bonding, the territorial expansion, the technological adaptation. All true, Sarah admitted, but he left out the most important part. We also evolved strong protective instincts and cooperative behaviors. We don't hunt other sapient species, Admiral. We protect them. As if to prove her point, the human fleet suddenly changed formation. The sensor operators' readings showed them moving to intercept something else entirely. Admiral, she called out, long-range sensors detect a Void Reaver pack approaching from the outer system. The human ships they're moving to intercept. Void Reavers were mechanical scavengers that stripped disabled ships for raw materials, usually killing any survivors in the process. They were one of the few truly hostile forces in this region of space. On the main screen, they watched as the human destroyers engaged the Reavers with devastating efficiency. The combination of plasma fire and kinetic rounds that had seemed so alien and threatening was perfectly adapted for fighting the armored, mechanical predators. 5 Void Reavers destroyed, reported the sensor operator, her voice filled with amazement. The human ships took no damage. They're protecting us. Commander Voss's voice came through the speakers again, this time with translation protocols properly calibrated. Kepler Station, Void Reaver threat eliminated. Are you in need of medical assistance or mechanical repairs? We have full engineering. Team standing by. Admiral Jexeron looked at Sarah and Jakob with new understanding. You knew. You knew they were coming to help, and you let us panic. We couldn't reveal ourselves without context, Jacob explained. If we'd just announced we were the species from Vextar's lecture, you would have assumed the worst. Sarah nodded. We needed you to see who we really are, not who your fears made us out to be. Professor Vexitar's voice crackled over the comm again. My theoretical models, they were incomplete. I predicted the predator, but I missed the protector. Over. The next hour, as the human rescue fleet docked with Kepler Station, a remarkable transformation took place. The same crew that had been terrified of theoretical Deathworld predators watched in amazement as human engineers worked alongside alien technicians to repair the station's damaged systems. Commander Patricia Voss, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and laugh lines, toured the station's facilities with Admiral Jexrin. Her easy manner and genuine concern for the station's inhabitants stood in stark contrast to the monster Vextar had described in his lecture. We've been monitoring your sector for decades, Voss explained as they walked through the medical bay, where human doctors were treating alien patients with cutting-edge techniques. When your distress beacon activated, we mobilized immediately. That's what neighbors do. Professor Vextar approached Sarah in the station's botanical gardens, where she was helping human botanists cross-pollinate alien food crops to improve their yield. Dr. Chen, he said, his reptilian features showing what passed for embarrassment among his species, I owe you an apology. My research was academically sound but contextually incomplete. Sarah looked up from a flowering Terran tomato, plant that was thriving in alien soil. Your models weren't wrong, Professor. We are apex predators. We did evolve on a death world. We do have all the adaptations you described. But you're also gardeners, Vextar observed, watching her gentle care of the hybrid plants. We're whatever the situation requires, Sarah replied. That's what makes us human. 3 months later, the annual Xenobiology Symposium reconvened, this time with a very different tone. Professor Vextar stood before the same amphitheater, but now human researchers sat openly among the audience. Colleagues, Vextar began. Last session I presented theoretical models of Deathworld apex predators. Today, I'm pleased to introduce you to Dr. Sarah Chen and Commander Jacob Torres, who will be presenting their research on adaptive cooperation in high-stress evolutionary environments. Sarah took the stage to enthusiastic applause from species who had once feared what she represented. Thank you, Professor Vextar. Today, we'd like to share what we've learned about the most important adaptation any species can develop. The holographic display showed images of humans working alongside dozens of alien species in joint research, projects, rescue operations, and peaceful colonies. The ability to see others not as prey or competitors, Sarah continued, but as family worth protecting. Jakob joined her on stage. We are predators, but we've chosen to be guardians instead. We are persistent hunters, but we hunt problems, not people. We thrive under stress, but we use that strength to help others when they can't help themselves. Hindu. The audience Admiral Jexran sat beside Commander Voss, their species' natural incompatibilities overcome by mutual respect and shared purpose. Around them, representatives from dozens of worlds listened to the humans describe their philosophy of protective cooperation. The universe is dangerous enough without us fighting each other, Sarah concluded. We humans learned long ago that the greatest strength isn't the ability to defeat your enemies. It's the ability to turn your enemies into friends. The applause was thunderous, filling the amphitheater with the sounds of hope rather than fear. Professor Vextar's theoretical monsters had become reality, but they were monsters who chose to be heroes instead. As the symposium ended and delegates mingled, sharing ideas and forging new partnerships, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that terrifying day when human ships had first appeared on Kepler Station's sensors. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest adaptation wasn't their ability to survive in hostile environments. It was their ability to make those environments less hostile for everyone else. And in the process, the humans had learned something too. They weren't the monsters of anyone's nightmares. They were the guardians of everyone's dreams, watching over a galaxy that had become their home and protecting species that had become their family. The Deathworld predators had indeed arrived among the stars, but they came not as conquerors, but as the answer to a prayer the galaxy didn't know it had been making.